This is Frank Islam, Chairman and CEO of our investment group, and your host of Washington Calling, where we interview leading voices from business and politics that impact you, the viewer. Today, our guest is Ambassador Sreenivasan. We are fortunate to have him as our guest. He had a very distinguished career in Indian Foreign Service. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for coming. And it's
Thank
a
you.
it's a privilege and honor for all of us that you came here and you came for the interview. So, Mr. Ambassador, tell us about yourself for our audience and what inspired you to join the Foreign Service.
Well, we have an all India competitive examination for the diplomatic service, which is considered one of the most difficult examinations. And it offers the best
Okay.
career in India. I'm talking about 50 years ago. So I competed and got selected. I have been in the service from 1967 to 2004. I joined in Japan and ended up in Vienna as the governor of the International Atomic Energy Agency. So it was a very interesting career, 10 years in the United States itself, 20 years in the UN. So very, very interesting, very fascinating.
So you consider the Foreign Service not just as a job, but as a career and lifestyle, and especially you're away
Yes,
from your friends, from your colleagues, and hardship you have in a foreign country, but you serve your country very well. And for that, we want to thank you for your leadership. I would like to talk to
thank you.
you
But
about.
never, there was never a dull moment.
There was no dull moment. Very well said. I want to talk to you about your view of the appointment of your fellow IFS officer, Mr. Jaishankar, as India's new External Affairs Minister. He was also
Yes,
ambassador to the United States, and he was also Foreign Secretary. I met him many times when I traveled with President Obama.
uh-huh.
What do you think your expectation is from his appointment? Especially, I'd like to talk about U.S.-India relationship, U.S.-China trade tensions, U.S.-Iran tensions, and also India and Pakistan relationship. Where are we going in those things?
Very good. Well, speaking of Jay Shankar, he
Yes.
started as a trainee with me. So he is 10 years junior to me in the service. And
Oh my
so
God.
he started off with me as a trainee, and so I know him quite well. His father was a very distinguished strategist, Sri K. Subramaniam, and he was going to Moscow, and so I was in charge of Moscow in Delhi, and so I had a very good acquaintance with him. And later we both were neighbors. He was in Prague as ambassador, and I was in Vienna, and so we used to meet very
Oh,
often. So I know him. I know his caliber. He's an exceptionally brilliant officer.
relationship, U.S.-India relationship, and also, and what about the fact that the we have and United States have a tensions also with Iran, and so what would be his policy in those areas, Mr. Ambassador?
Well, China is going to be our major preoccupation for the next many years. I don't know how many years, because both China and India are prospering, developing very fast. But China is ahead of us by about 20 years. Have the determination to dominate Asia and, if possible, dominate the world or overtake the United States. So, in this situation, there's a lot of cooperation on the one hand and considerable tension because of the border situation. India-China border has not been demarcated, and that's an old issue and will continue to go for a long time. But China is very clear that they will not allow India to be the dominant force in Asia. And that in 1962, they committed aggression against India, basically, as they said, to teach India a lesson. They didn't want India to
Right.
dominate Asia like it happened at that time. So that tension is very much there. And but at the same time, we need to work with China. You cannot wish away your neighbors. They're a powerful neighbor, and we used to work. We need to work with him, and that is the attitude that we have taken. And at the same time, China's relations with the US is very important. Russia's relations with India are very important. So we are in a very, very active diplomatic history period at this time, particularly after Mr. Donald Trump came and things are all uncertain and we do not know what the next tweet will say. from the President of the United
Right,
States. So we are all kind
right,
of tenterhooks about that. Visit
right.
by
I
Mr.
guess,
Imran Khan.
that, yeah, what he said to Imran Khan by mediating in Kashmir is is something that I don't quite understand, and nobody understands it. And so we have to be careful, obviously, in terms of his mind and his tweet.
Which way
But
that there
we
will,
have to
our
live in.
position.
You're right. So yeah, I want you to talk to the audience about the trade tension between India and the United States, and especially the preferential treatment that was called GPS, general purpose,
Yes, yes.
I think it's called generalized system of
Preferences, system of
performance. I
preferences.
think that's
Yes,
right, right, right.
right.
And so, should India keep it cool or react or rather than retaliate? What's your thoughts on that?
No, the trade problems between India and Pakistan, India and United States is not so large. I think President Trump was the first one to raise this question of imbalance in trade. But that's only about $500 billion. No, sorry, $50 billion, while
50
their
bill.
balance with China is $560 billion. So it is not comparable. But right from the
Right.
beginning, Mr. Trump has been saying that India has been making so much money in trade, which came as for us all as a surprise because it's a much bigger country and they can afford to have a slight imbalance in trade. We have had differences in the WTO with the United States. And so he hit upon the idea that in benefiting. And therefore, in the context of his tariff war against China, he also introduced a minor increase in the tariffs with India. And naturally, we had to respond also. But after the Prime Minister and President met in Osaka, there was an agreement that
Right.
these problems will be resolved between the ministers. So I don't think that
Right.
the trade issue between India and the US is very big. But there we have other
I,
problems like
I
Iran and Russia.
right. I agree with you that it's a minor issue, and both countries, India and United States, have a shared interest and shared values. And as you know, there's a bilateral, and in both sides, the all United States, the support for U.S. and India to work together because we have a shared goal and shared responsibility. So, um, my
Absolutely.
question to you is: what India needs to do to attract foreign investment, and especially improving the infrastructure, which is very important to India, and also job creation.
Well, the first and most important thing, there are all kinds
Right.
of formalities and all kinds of rules and regulations and very
So you
little
talk about reforming,
digest. See,
reforming.
yes, but the
Go
reforms
ahead.
have been done to a great extent. Mr. Modi has introduced so many reforms. He has simplified rules. He has made it easier for people to come and invest in India. He has started this program of Make in India. That is a special program by which he expects people to foreign countries to come and invest in India and make joint production of materials for export, not only for use in India, but export. So, in every way, he is trying to increase investments into India. But of course, the growth has not been very good. It's rather sluggish. The growth has not been
Right.
excellent. But we are
Right.
making progress, and we already come up in the list of countries with which you can easily do business. Several steps we have come up. But still, I think companies find it difficult to deal with the bureaucracy in India, and that's the problem.
Mr. Ambassador, as I understand,
Yeah.
you're an accomplished author. Please tell us a little bit about your upcoming book on Modi and his foreign policy. Do you think there has been some success story of Modi's foreign policy?
Yes, indeed. It's a very positive book. It's a very positive book. More than anything else, his greatest achievement was the relationship with the United States, which was at its
Yes.
very height in 2016 when we became a close defense partner. This was a new relationship between India and the United States. And he said in the US Congress, Mr. Modi said that you will now hear a new symphony in India US relations. So it was at the very top and there were great expectations. But as it happened, on November 8th, we heard the news that President Trump got elected. So naturally,
Right,
there was a big change that
right.
the progression that was taking place was halted in a way, and it took some time for us to understand what exactly his own vision of Asia Pacific was. It's still not very clear. Even his policy on China is not clear. How he expects India to play a role in Asia Pacific is not very clear. So we are still figuring out as to, because his basic idea is America first, and he is a bit of a he tries to come back or retreat from the international posture that the US has. Very, very confusing signals we have.
So we just have to navigate it, Mr.
Like this.
Ambassador.
Yes.
Under the
Yeah.
circumstances, you have to navigate it. And
Yes.
but I said earlier, there is a bipartisan support in the U.S. In the Congress for India because
Right.
of the two countries share values in terms of democracy. India is the largest democracy. We are the oldest democracy in the world. So you
Right.
just have to navigate it. And
Yes,
I
but the
know I
problem
wanted
is
to
the
go ahead, Mr. Ambassador.
any foreign policy with any country has to be navigated the circumstances, particularly in the world is changing so fast. But in the case of the United States, the problem is that very often actions are taken which are unexpected, like his withdrawing from various agreements. So when you are used to a certain world order, Trump does not seem to believe in the United Nations as much as his predecessors did. And he believes that every country must be sovereign and take action on its own interests. And he doesn't see much in multilateralism. And that is one big difference that we have to face. And the world, which was kind of the architecture world after the Second World War, based on multilateralism. And so we have many institutions who work on that basis. And therefore, dealing with everything on a bilateral basis becomes difficult. So you need to have many, many negotiations with many, many countries when you don't have a multilateral framework which everybody understands. The dilemma we are facing today. But we get good news from him. Sometimes we get bad news. This mediation was something which was shocking to everybody because no Indian Prime Minister would have asked for it. And he said he asked. So what do we do to him? And so we can only say we didn't ask. And so, so this is a very difficult kind of negotiation. So we cannot
It
tell the
is. It
president
is.
that he is telling a lie. Yeah. But
We
anyway,
all
but
of us in the same. Yeah, you're right. All of us in the same boat. We as an American are also challenged by his Twitter and by his words and by his hatred and bigotry against certain people. So we are challenged. The only way we're going to make a change is when we have a new president.
right, right, right. But there are all indications that he will continue for another 4 years, right?
I'm not really sure. I think that the time will tell. So let's just
Yes,
wait for
exactly.
it. I I don't speak on behalf of American people, but time will tell, and I hope um, we'll just see what happens. It's a democracy; you never know what's going to
Right.
happen, right?
But we
And if you,
but we he has not done anything against India. That is something which we should be clear about. So he has not
right,
done
right,
anything
I
which will
agree
hurt
with
India.
you.
That is very clear.
Yeah, yes, yes.
But these
He has
minor
a lot of
irritations. Yes.
respect for India and India's democracy, and he has a lot of respect for Indian Americans, and I haven't had a chance to talk to him several times on this topic. And I want to talk
Right.
to you before we close the conversation, Mr. Ambassador. What lessons from Kerala can the rest of the India, especially in health and education areas, can learn?
A very heavy investment, we have been able to make much progress in education and health. And our statistics show that we are as good as some of the European countries in these two areas. And that is because of the focus that we have given and the investments we have made in both these areas. And plus literacy is another very important factor because Kerala is the most literate state in the whole of India. I don't know whether you heard it because I can't hear you. I can't see you moving. So
Yes, there's no question that Kerala has been a beacon of hope when it comes to
yes,
the health policy as well as education policies. And I would think that the India can learn from their what they have been able to accomplish. And I'm with you on that. Uh, I wanted to also
right.
talk to you about how do you rate Modi on India's neighborhood policy that compared to his immediate predecessor, and especially Bhutan. As you know, you were ambassador to Bhutan, if I remember correctly. And so, how do you rate his neighborhood policy? Bhutan, Pakistan, and then you have China. We talked about China, we talked about Pakistan, but we haven't talked about Bangladesh and Bhutan. Can you shed some light on it, Mr. Ambassador?
Yes, neighborhood policy has always been the challenge of every prime minister because
Yes,
if you give too many concessions, then they demand more. If we are tough, then they are even worse. And therefore, how to strike that balance of being at one time being correct about this with them and also being able to carry them together. So we have been very, very accommodative of the requests of our neighboring countries, and we had a fairly good relationship. But with the advent of China, with its checkbook diplomacy, I think things have changed a little because many
right.
of these smaller countries look up to China for big projects, something, the gifts that they hand out, those things we are not able to do. Pakistan is an old story. China has been very close with Pakistan for a long time. But the other countries, like Bangladesh or Maldives or Sri Lanka or
Bhutan,
they have
Bhutan.
moved away from us practically because of the Chinese seeing that their interests lie in India, and therefore there have been some improvements. What Mr. Modi did was he put this as his first priority. In fact, he's the only Indian Prime Minister who has said that South Asia has to progress together. Our economic progress cannot be real unless our neighbors join with us. And that was a very good signal he gave. But at the end of the 5 years, we do not find that our relationship with our neighbors is any better. Anything, it has become only worse. But towards the end of his fifth year, he has been able to rebuild some relationship with Sri Lanka and Maldives. And new governments have come and they are less inclined towards China. So, this is a battle that we have to fight all the time. And neighbors are generally not very friendly according to the old theory, Arthashastra and so on. So the nearest neighbors always tend to be inimical. But next to that, the next line of neighbors will be your friends. And that is the theory that's heard about. And this is very true in the case of India. We have had a lot of problems with our neighbors. We make a lot of concessions. We have given them lag. We have done various things. But you can never meet all their requirements. And they're all dependent on India in many ways.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, and thank you very much for coming to our show. This is Frank Islam wishing you a great week, and thank you for watching.